Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining for today's industry study session. So this is our second industry study session by Pooja Kadambi, who is Head of Innovation and Clinical Research at Turtle Shell Technologies, which is also known as Dozee. She has a bachelor's from University of Cincinnati in biomedical engineering with excellent grades. Again, she had done a fellowship, a clinical research fellowship with University of Cincinnati College of Medicine, and continued to do a Master's of Science in Computer Engineering, again from University of Cincinnati. And she has very good experience working with a lot of medical devices, especially some of the companies known as like Inaxel. And she's been project and program management consultant for CCAMP, and also with some of the companies which bring together the engineers, the medical doctors, as well as the business people at one place, that is high healthcare innovation for Indian healthcare. So there are quite a lot to talk about Pooja, but you listen to her experience, which is very rich. So I leave the stage to Pooja to start the session, and I'll stop sharing screen. Pooja, you can share your slides.
Great. Thank you, Abhishek. And
last thing I wanted to announce to students is that if you have any questions, post it on chat. We'll take it at the end of the session. And there'll be some polls which we have designed, and that will be posted as and when Pooja says. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. And in fact, one of the first polls, Abhishek, I think, was on what they'd hope to learn in a session like this. So you can already put it live so that when I take the first break, I can make sure we can cover those points. All right. Thanks, everyone. I don't need any further introduction than the lovely one that Abhishek gave. Let me say that this is what I hope to cover. I know it's a lot, so I'll do my best to finish it within the 1 hour and leave enough time for discussion. So I work at, as he mentioned, a company called Dozee. So I figured that would be a best place to start, talk about things that I've learned in the last year or so working with this company, and a lot of the interesting decisions that they've taken that have led to them being one of the most successful MedTech companies today at the moment in India. Second will be not just from there, but also from the rest of the industrial experiences that I've seen, that I've spoken with friends and colleagues, and saying what are some of the lessons that is important to understand to go from what is essentially an idea to actually being able to create impact. From an academic perspective, this can even be within your final year projects and whatever you might be working on. The focus should always be executing something that can create an impact or to showcase what you've learned. The third point is focusing around my role in R&D, which is, while I've worn many hats in terms of product development, regulatory, production, management, my favorite will always be, I think, research and development. And there's a couple of nuances, especially around clinical trials, patentability, working with different data sets and the complexities in MedTech that I'll just touch upon. The fourth part, I should thank Abhishek for wanting this to be included, because he had heard me give a talk related to diversity. So I have a slightly different perspective about how diversity can help shape interdisciplinarity and get to better solutions. So that's more of an interesting discussion point. And finally, summarizing all of it into key takeaways. So to this extent, I hope this has a good setup, but let's dive into Dozee. So the Dozee story started with the two founders, Gaurav and Mudit, who were IIT graduates working in Altair, which is a simulation engineering consulting firm and software development firm. And they were passionate about technology and were working on race cars, and were planning actually to pursue their masters abroad. Fate intervened, both in terms of these two individuals wanting to make a bigger difference in people's lives, having seen the impact slightly inefficient or low-tech healthcare can have even at a personal level, decided to, not go ahead with their masters at that time and founded the company Turtle Shell Technologies, or Dozee, in 2015. So what drove this decision, right? One of the biggest things was, even today, most of us know that India has a huge population. We've just overtaken China, and we don't have enough hospital beds. Even the absolute numbers, the concentration is in very, very small clusters. There's large parts of the country, large parts of individual that have to travel, over 100 kilometers to get even emergency healthcare. This is not a problem that can be solved with just manpower and just training. It's too big a problem, and it's just exponentially growing over time. So fundamentally, what Turtle Shell decided to focus on, where they realized, is there's a huge lack of information in healthcare. Patients are often coming when it's too late, already when they're in an emergency, when an ambulance is called. And one of the frustrating points to the founders was, we have so much predictive technology, so much estimation technology in things like even your traffic maps, right? Granted, in a city like Bangalore, that's not always perfect, but I don't think Google can also account for some nuances of the Indian system. So weather predictors, earthquake estimators, engine health in cars, I bring back to them. Why can't we have more predictive measures in healthcare? One, it's because it's a very protected data set. People are not, it's not easily shareable. It's not something that people want publicized. And two, the very act of monitoring someone or having, your health parameters around often plays on the psyche of humans, and they don't want it. They don't want to feel like they're under constant surveillance. So what the focus started with is saying, especially during COVID, the decision was taken saying, not just ICU beds, but every bed could use some monitoring, whether it be in the hospital, whether it be in the home. There has to be a way to monitor patients in a seamless manner. So that's how, Dozee kind of took shape. And I'm just showing this trajectory from 2015, 2023, which is this year, saying how it works. The company was founded with an idea of, we want to improve healthcare. It took a whole year to even figure out, okay, this is the problem, and potentially let's use BCG. What exactly BCG is, I'll get to. But fundamentally, the core technology was identified in about a year. And a year from that, there was some testing on multiple levels, both in terms of the tech, in terms of the market, the customer, all of those things. Finally shaping up that this is what they were going to do. Should they go to hospital? Should they get to home? In 2019, they decided, let's start with home and the wellness space, and slowly we'll move into healthcare. We all know what happened at the end of 2019 and throughout 2020. So when the need arose, the founders and the small team, then I think it was only about 15 to 18 people, took the call that, forget about the home specific thing. We need to pivot and build a product, incorporate SpO2, and get into monitoring patients for COVID, because the country needs it. And then the rest of it helped kind of accelerate this pathway. There was a focus on hospitals because it had established, there was a lot of data that came in, funding as well. They were able to raise funds on the basis of how well the system performed, to be able to focus on hospitals first, build credibility at that level, and then, enter homes gradually after that. Last year, which was in the growth phase, right? Saying, now we know we want to do hospitals. What does it take to sell to them? What does it take to reach the patients? A lot of it is based on trust. And trust is garnered from getting certifications, approvals, publications, and all of that. And having received, a US FDA clearance at the end of last year for one of the product variants, this year is focusing on scale. Getting to, right now we're at about 8,000 beds, getting to about 20,000 by the end of the year, being able to cover all sorts of situations in terms of hospitals, and being ready to go international as well. So this is a slightly older snapshot, but our website always has some numbers live, this is how if your idea works. It's not about just the technology working, it's about how many people has it reached, what is the benefit that's been created. And being able to showcase that is a huge motivator for many people in the company, and actually really shows you that every bit that you're working on, whether it be a hardware schematic, cloud architecture, an application, that it's touching real people and touching real people in a very vulnerable state. And so anyone in the medical electronics or healthcare field needs to remind themselves of that. It's a great rewarding feature, but it also comes with a sense of responsibility that should not be taken lightly. So I promised that I'd tell you what ballistocardiography was. The etymology comes from three primary words. Ballisto, which is similar to what ballistics come from, which represents the force, cardio, which is the heart, and graphy, which is in Greek to measure or plot. So, you have seismography, which is for earthquakes. And in fact, some of the earlier indications in the 1870s was around if we can, pick up earthquake vibrations in a very quiet room with the right setup, can we not pick up the vibrations from within a human body? And they could. And BCG, not as BCG, of course, but vibration technology was used extensively in cars. It's used in your cars as well to predict things like engine health, issues that may be happening, the wear and tear of certain joints. And what we do in terms of at Dozee is utilizing the piezoelectric effect to convert the mechanical vibrations into electrical signals and deriving a lot of data from there. So you have DSP coming in, which is, processing the signal, conditioning it. You have algorithms around peak detection, clustering. You have things like statistical modeling being applied to be able to recognize changes and quality metrics. And so a lot of this comes together to derive some very important information from a very complicated signal, because as you can imagine, something that deals with micro vibrations is obviously susceptible to macro vibrations. So a lot of the work is about getting signal from noise, getting a solution from nothing. And this is a rough representative of what you see that looks like a little barcode-like thing over there, is how without any conditioning filtering is how you would see a vibration signal. The larger kind of waves that you see in green represent the diaphragmatic and the lung movements. So that's your breathing. And the smaller blips, actually you can see two if you have really good eyesight, would be the lub and the dub. So the ventricular systole and diastole of the heart. So that's how, I've simplified it, of course, but it takes a lot to get from the black bars to those individual signals. And why is that interesting, or why is that important? So most people have heard of an ECG, and I'm sure you study that in your course as well. So the electrical stimulation, right, that is the input. Your mechanical waveforms are the output. It's a reaction of the body. What actually is allowing you to pump blood is not the electrical circuitry, it is the heartbeats and the motion. So in that way, from a first principle perspective, the mechanics of the heart is the true representative of its function. Something wrong with the electric definitely correlates to something wrong in the mechanics, but the reverse is not really true. You can have dead tissue, you can have a valvular dysfunction, and without being able to, and just by looking at the electrical aspect, you can't gauge anything. What you see below is an echo. Again, I'm sure you've studied this, and that represents the velocity of the blood flow. So some idea of the mechanics of the heart, and you can visualize it as well. So this requires a particular very expensive machine, skilled technicians, complex viewing, and there's no other proxy for the mechanical representation of the heart until BCG. Similarly for the lungs, right? Today, the closest thing could be, I guess, a capnography waveform, which people talk about end-tidal CO2, which is basically it's measuring the change between the oxygenation or the level of carbon dioxide in your breath and creating waves. These are, again, more, I would call this a marketing-based plot, not exactly accurate of the square waves that you'd see on capnography, but nevertheless, you get the point. So the mechanical motions of the lungs, right? Can you imagine if someone, say, had pneumonia? Wouldn't that change the mechanics? Wouldn't that, the change in the medium, wouldn't that affect it? So today, even with a stethoscope, right, a skilled doctor can put it on the back and hear whether there are crackles, hear whether there's disproportionate breaths, all of their human neural network trained to pick up on these audio signals. But micro vibrations, we can operate not just in the audible range, but in ranges beyond the human ear. So who's to say we couldn't pick it up earlier? So again, it's about being a comprehensive solution, right? We have the world's first contactless blood pressure, which is a fascinating bit of research, and it's still in its final stages of refinement and getting better from there. But this would truly be a global solution, right? It's not just India that needs a better way to continuously monitor blood pressure. Perfect example of while trying to solve a problem at an indigenous level, you can actually benefit a larger population. But if we had limited ourselves to just BCG, right, we wouldn't be solving the problem. The reason I like showing this slide or discussing it is if you see this extensible accessory wrist, right, doctors need the information. They need a variety of parameters. If as a company or as an individual, you decide that, no, only I'm going to focus on only things I can deliver with BCG, you might not actually solve a problem. And if you don't solve a problem, your product is not going to sell and you really don't have a solution. And so, maybe someday everything can be contactless using, BCG, radar, some sort of fancy like image processing, biomechanics, who knows. But for now, we still want to deliver a comprehensive solution. And as the R&D gets there, we still have to have an offering to our customers. So one of the interesting parts of it is the BCG aside, right? The sensor sheet is actually placed under the mattress. So remember what I said about patients not wanting to feel like they're monitored all the time or their privacy being invaded by cameras. They have to do nothing else but lie on this bed, lie on their mattress, whether at home, whether at a hospital, no wires connected to them, nothing beeping, nothing, alarming at their bedside. Just lie down and the system does the rest. So it's moving towards, you guys have heard of invasive, non-invasive, minimally invasive technologies. This is a new category, which I don't know if it exactly has a name, but I like to call it non-intrusive monitor, which is you don't even know it's there, but when you need it, the data will be available or the right information goes to the right person at the right time. Which gets down to what I was talking about with your early warning systems and being able to be more predictive, right? So the doctors, the nurses, it's not just about one value. They can see what's been happening throughout the history. So as and when, you get deeper into understanding the problem, you deliver, say, an incremental solution, it just builds upon that and is able to get better and better and cover more of the pipeline. So yeah, so this is where it is. And, one of the things under development is also around being able to offer diagnostic tests or being able to do screening or spot checks at sites so that people even know that they have to seek care. It could be at factories, it could be in, massive hiring, massive tech parks, whatever it might be. So this is evolving, but it's just a sign of you need to focus on offering a solution or giving your customer what it requires. Let the need drive your technology and its application, not the reverse. And it's about maintaining that continuum of care, right? Most of people's lives, hopefully, is spent outside a hospital. And so you need to be able to kind of collect that data, have it there, have it ready so that they know when they need to go to a hospital. You can have a service where people are monitoring patients that are higher at risk. For those who are overall fine and want to monitor themselves, they can be another option. So having a modular system, having something adaptable and layers of information and precision is how you need to really build a company, not just a product. So I'd mentioned trust, right? So one level is all of these certifications. I don't know if they teach you anything about IEC, ISO compliances, but it's very important to have a safe system, both from a cybersecurity perspective, electronics perspective, your clinical research, and so much more. Another way to convince people, because, when you're in even academia has its own biases, but in a private sector, why would anyone believe me unless I can get a peer review of my data? You need to be transparent, you need to showcase, you need to open yourself up to criticism and scrutiny before people are willing to believe what you're saying. Similarly, patents is something that, if granted, show that you are unique and novel, and as I'll cover a little later, it's a little bit more than just bragging rights. So before we move forward, I think you can put even the second poll up, Abhishek, if anyone wants to answer them. And are there any questions at this phase?
Pooja, I have one problem. I have polls ready, but I can't put it as questions. I don't know. The way I set up poll was all together.
Sure, that's fine. So it can just be on throughout. We'll just deal with it at the end, but let it just be available throughout.
Yeah. So I will launch all 5 and then let them answer. Then we can take it.
Yeah, at the end. That's fine. Let them have more time. That's totally fine. Are there any questions at this time, or shall I move on?
Any questions? Okay, we can go ahead, I guess.
Okay. Cool. I hope people are listening then. Otherwise, because I can't see anyone, right? So I'm just talking to myself here.
So you can respond by emojis like how we did last session, or put that if you're still there intact.
Yeah, can we confirm even if like even 5 people can react in some way? But at least you're listening to me, Abhishek. It's fine. That's the
No, there are people listening. Very good students. You know how BMS is.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Hani. So let's see. So everyone thinks this is what product development looks like, right?
This is different honey, not that honey.
It doesn't matter. I can say thank you to whichever honey responded.
That's true, but this is the junior honey. The one which is interning with us is different. That's what I wanted to say.
I see. Sure. No problem. So I'm sure. So this is not your FDA waterfall type of diagram and all, but most people assume product development happens like this, right? Like it's so clean, it's so nice. You make a point of care, you go to the next stage, everything is perfect. Everyone should get into, building your own product, and everything will be smooth sailing, right? This is what one hopes it will be. And unfortunately, I think this is what people teach also, not to put down any particular field or education, I think, but it's more of until you experience it, right? You realize it's not like this, it's kind of like this. There's a lot of clustering that happens. There's things that go back and forth. There's a lot of ideas coming in. There's a lot of, conflicting requirements. And actually not even like this, it's actually more like this. It really looks like one, Black Widow spider web sometimes, but there's a lot of interdependencies, right? And in some ways, if you like a challenge, if you like problem solving, working in constraints can actually be quite exhilarating, because that's when you truly have to be really creative, really innovative, because you have to satisfy so many different pieces of the puzzle. And, in places like India, you'll have severe requirements, say, around cost constraints, around like government schemes and policies around shifting things. And so the uniqueness, also the complexity and the challenges, it is a lot. I will not lie and say it's not, and it can be demotivational at times, but it also can be a real, thrill to kind of think and have to constantly reinvent what you've created in order to meet a requirement. And so people, I know BMS specifically, they do talk about things like the biodesign principle, right? Design thinking, identify your need, characterize your need, ensure that it's done correctly. Need is part of the problem, but that's not the end, right? Always keeping the need front and center is important, but you cannot forget planning and a multifaceted of planning. Is it feasible? You can't wait till the end system and everything is done to be able to do some testing, right? Even launching, if you're a company, if you're a startup, you need to get to market and start selling or start getting some revenues. Otherwise, you're not going to last very long. And always know that the world keeps evolving, the world keeps changing, right? I'm sure many of you have, if not all of you, have tried ChatGPT or DALL-E and all, new features that pop up on Instagram or YouTube, whatever it may be. With technology changing at the pace that it is, people getting access faster than ever, even geopolitical shifts that happen, if you're not in touch, right? When I say survey, I'm not talking about taking a poll or, answering questions on a survey. It's mostly about surveying the landscape and your industry. You need to constantly be learning, constantly be thinking. You can't just sit in your desk in your computer and not look up. One, that you'll get really bored really fast, and two, you will not be able to grow as a person or a technical contributor. And why is planning important, right? Why bother planning? Why can't we just do and then figure it out? Planning is slow. Planning is, it can be a roadblock. And this is true, even in your classes, right? When you're studying for something, your projects, it may not be at this scale, but sometimes taking a pause, right? Taking a breath and planning, you'll realize where are your roadblockers? What is your rate limiting step? What do you have to finish before the next one? With experience, you get better at estimating, say, time and cost and what things can be done in parallel, what things can be done, what have to be done sequentially. But without that, if you don't have a plan, you'll end up wasting more time. So one of the things I love saying is never mistake speed for efficiency. Sometimes the person who starts slower, right? And it goes back to all the way, what is that childhood story, the hare and the tortoise? I mean, there's some logical fallacies in that, but that aside, it is about take a longer time, be the rocket ship that takes maybe years to plan and then reaches the moon. Don't be a paper aeroplane that you can build in 5 minutes, throw, but comes down crashing within a few seconds and can only be used a few number of times. So that's what planning does. That's the difference between those things in a very, very exaggerated manner. So from the team, right? And I'm not saying people don't have this. Everyone, these are good skills for anyone, anywhere in life, not in MedTech, even beyond. But many people I spoke to, and I tried to talk to people who were, fresh out of college and saying, hey, what are the biggest things you learned when you're coming to industry? And some of these were true even of myself, right? Sometimes academia can be a rigid system, yes, but also very comforting in that there's a safety net. There's a way to do things. People tell you how to do things. I have different thoughts on how much that should be, but that's for another topic. And so flexibility, right? Being able to say that, oh, this happened. Okay, how do I roll with it? How do I change to it? How do I take advantage of it? Perseverance is about, yes, they may say no, but don't focus on the no, focus on the why that no was said. Why is it not happening? The RCAs or the root causes around that. And fortune does favor the bold in this case. It doesn't mean being reckless, but sometimes you have to take a calculated risk. You have to decide that, yeah, I'm not getting feature all 100 features, but I'm getting 80. I need to get there to see, are the last 20 really so important? Could I have missed something? Taking advantage of, as I said, not just Dozee, but many companies in COVID-19 that have done well even after, basically decided to power through it, deal with all the uncertainty, all the chaos, to show and make a difference. And that's about being bold, because it could have easily gone the other way. And a reputation once lost, especially in healthcare, can be lost for good. So, and the learn part, right? This is, as students, your job is to learn. But I think every individual, if you stop learning in a technical space, whether it be R&D, whether it be development, actually anything, forget technical. There's a lot you can learn from your peers, and a lot you can learn from those even in different functions, those you interact with, that things are not as siloed anymore. And these are the biggest lessons that help people in industry. And frankly, they can help you anywhere. But it's very important to kind of look into these things when you do your own thing. So most people have heard of things like Six Sigma, design thinking, SWOT analyses, a lot of these techniques, and I myself had to study some. And through experience, what I realized is across sectors, across everything we do, right? These three driving principles, if you do this, you can really do well. One is about, again, when I mentioned that speed versus efficiency, right? Try to make things simple. Make sure whatever key decisions are taken, that you know where they're coming from, and measure what you get out of it. Otherwise, you're doing a lot of wasted effort. So it's not about speed. It's about optimizing every action you do for both the short term and long term. The second is about the user-centric, which is the problem, the need, the everything, constantly going back for feedback, going at every stage. As one of the sayings in another tale goes, right? The customer's like, okay, give me something gray with 4 legs and a tail. And in his mind, he's expecting an elephant, and what he was delivered was a donkey. it fit the brief, but because you didn't ask questions, clearly the expectation weren't met. And the last part is really important. And I like to stress these to most engineers and MBA students that I get to talk to, is remain grounded. And that's not about humility. It is about not ignoring perspectives. Just because we have the internet, just because we can Google things, doesn't mean direct observation or direct communication with experts and those in the field should be taken lightly. Even if, at a senior level, maybe you can't do it often, but always value the direct observations, the direct inputs that you're getting from the boots in the ground, from those who are talking to the customers, because that is really the wealth. A company like 3M does it phenomenally. Even today, they have a lot of emphasis placed on talking to customers, spending time in the field. There's some other companies also, where the management or CEOs also spend time in the factory lines with both the workers in the field, with their sales teams, all of those things, just to understand the perspectives and not be so separated from them. Just because our code is in the cloud doesn't mean our heads have to be. And so the human pitfalls, right? And now I'm not liking the title because I think it gives a negative connotation to people. But what I meant by this is saying, don't ignore the people aspect, right? Who you work with, who you learn from, how you interact with them, it matters. All the tech in the world will fail if you don't factor in for human error, human ingenuity, human needs, and frankly, the expectation or the desires of getting it done. Also, even when you outsource, right? Who are the people making your product? At the end of the day, you are responsible for whatever you produce. And so this is, again, not something that should be taken lightly. And you need to build those relationships, or you need to build relationships with people who have a good network and an established relationship in that sense. So one way or the other, you still need to work with people, and always remember that. This is something, again, it could be a controversial opinion. Some people differ on this. And I strongly believe that if it's not an incremental change, right? Like bigger organizations, maybe you have a set product, you're just trying to do some compliance related changes to, say, a user manual or an encasing for a different country. Those are incremental changes. But when you're doing something fundamentally disruptive or fundamentally new, or, when you're a startup, you learn a lot by doing. And the more you keep in-house, right? Yes, you'll make mistakes, but mistakes get much more expensive the longer you go. So in the early stages, fail quickly, fail often, learn from them, and make new mistakes. I always say to my team also, and I try to emulate that, saying I think people should be rewarded for, finding bugs, making new mistakes, finding new ways of messing things up so that you can prevent it in the future. And regulatory has a lot of nuance. For example, working with consultants and everything, they will not know your product as well as you do. And you will not be able to defend yourself against the auditors, or you may end up on a very expensive wrong pathway if you don't do it in-house. Same thing with customer service, right? Now everyone talks about chatbots and WhatsApp groups and third-party services and call centers. When you're early, when you're young, when your product is new, do it yourself. Same thing with training, right? If you see, all of this comes down to, if you have created something unique, and when I say you, I'm talking about as a team, as an entity, whatever, you are the best person to take these core decisions and to take informed decisions. And if you're young and inexperienced, the only way to take informed decisions is to try it yourself, learn it yourself, and then do it. I'll pause again if there's any questions. Otherwise, I'll go to the third section. All right. Cool. So research and development in MedTech, one big part of it is clinical trials. A lot of people have heard about it, and people think of it as end game. Not the Avengers kind, but like the end goal, saying you have to do everything, you have to perfect your product, and then you go to clinical trials, and as soon as one clinical trial is over, you're done. And that's what it is. But it's not an end goal. A clinical trial is actually a validation metric or a validation tool pathway to help you throughout the process. That doesn't mean the first time you 3D print a prototype, you go and implant it in someone. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying there's different phases of the research process. And if you notice, even though I'm talking about R&D, I mentioned post-market, because continuous improvement, enhancements, all of that, the process doesn't end the minute the product hits the market. And so to that extent, even clinical trials, there's different phases that happens. And you can see the top bar, we talk about drugs, which most people have heard of. And in the bottom, I've kind of added something for specifically around medical devices, because it's slightly different and how you approach it also is different. And depending on the type of medical device, whether you're a diagnostic, whether you're an implant, whether you're a screening tool, a digital health tool, these all can look a little bit differently. Similarly, from a terminology perspective, right? If you think of evidence as like a pyramid, actually it should be like an inverted pyramid in this case, where you start small. In drug trials, maybe it even starts, the pre-market stuff has some things with animal trials and everything. In devices, except for few implants, not many require an animal, or is not even appropriate to do an animal level lab. You can do a pilot study, which is called a phase 1 in drugs, and this is just kind of, does this work? Is this POC even worth pursuing further? Often you can have edits, minor changes, major changes between them. And then you do something which is called a pivotal study in medical devices, which is a larger group of patients. And you kind of narrow down to what your intended use is and focus on that. You could still make some changes if you're working on, say, a software model, AI, ML, anything like that. These can be used for your data sets to finalize your algorithm. And then you can, a subset of a pivotal or a secondary pivotal study, you can split into a developmental study, which is, hey, this data we're going to be using to improve X, your product. And then you go into a validation study, which is around, it's ready to go. Whatever data the customer gets, that's what we're basing it off of. And that could be like, even with in vitro diagnostics and everything, it goes head to head against a gold standard typically. And the evidence is what it is. And if it works out within your claims, you can launch. And then after you launch, you continue to survey it, which is after your approvals, you can do after your approvals and everything. And once you're in the market, it's not just about marketing data, right? You can do a whole separate study to observe the impact, to look for adverse events, to see if any new risks arise. And yeah, good research takes time. And even to get to month 0, sometimes people take 1 year to get to month 0. And month 6 beyond, the ... dots can extend up to 5 years, 10 years, even a decade, right? Because with the more serious your device in terms of a risk, the longer it is in or within around the body, the longer you have to study it. And so this is nothing except to say that with every kind of, it is a stage gate in some ways. A lot of these things cannot be done in parallel, but the more you prepare, right? If you prepare well in month 0, you won't have to like go back to month 0 for a while. Of course, if it's not working out, that's another thing. But the worst feeling in the world is being ready to start, or your product being ready, and then having to delay months, if not a year, because of some sort of document or compliance or bureaucracy, that you didn't know of before. So know the process early on. I don't have to explain any of these 3. If I do, then that would be a problem actually. But fundamentally, when we talk about people's autonomy, is every person as a human, it's every individual. You have to respect that. And that's not just the patients, it's the doctors, it's the nurses, it's every person that interacts with your technology. When you talk about fair, right? It's not just about equal access to technology, though that's something beyond. In India, if you want to really make an impact on the masses, even access to treatment, if you're improving that, you're helping with this. And the benefit, sometimes in a clinical study and an observation study, that patient may not benefit directly now, but they can help benefit people in the future, which is why these 3 things, right, is the reason informed consent becomes so important. I don't know how many of you have heard of the difference between a randomized controlled trial and real world evidence. But fundamentally, right, randomized clinical trial is very, very controlled. So you know for sure your solution works in this set of people. But in the real world, maybe your solution applies to a broader scale. And how does it perform then, when it's more of an uncontrolled setting? And so more and more regulators are moving towards giving a lot of weightage to real world evidence and actually helping shorten the approval timelines and all for companies that show real world evidence as a driver of change and proof that change works. Similarly, one of the other big drivers is digital health, right? India is just at the cusp of this. In the West, they've used EHRs a lot longer, but there's multiple sources of data, right? And today with the mobile phone in everyone's pocket, and I recently even experienced creating a AHID and the Ayushman Bharat ID, and like working with looking at the QR codes in a government hospital and seeing how it can even pull your records from your emails and scan it. It's quite brilliant with what all they're trying to do, and it's only going to get better. So where there are all these sources of real world data that is at our fingertips that was so much harder to collect decades ago that we should not be blind to. Second, this is purposely complicated because I'm not trying to make you read any of this. It is to share that there's a wealth of information. And as I mentioned, right, when we talk about modeling or machine learning or neural networks, it's not just the current state that's important. It's the previous state. It's the transition between states. I don't know if control systems is one of your subjects, but moving between states of health also, right? If you look at it from a theory, a lot of it can be predicted based on the past information, based on your family history, and each encounter pushing you into the multi-nodes, because it's not a simple closed loop system. When you go from a state of unhealthy back to a state of health, it's usually not a zero-sum thing. There's continuous deterioration, until a emergency event and or death. So from an innovation perspective, right? Even that ideation stage is not just, some people do. Maybe you just wake up in the morning, you're like, oh my God, I have this solution. Oh my God, I think this is how it is. But that also doesn't come from nowhere, right? A lot of expertise and a lot of reason you can somehow think, and that eureka moment that happens is because you are obsessively thinking about the problem. And you can only obsessively think about the problem if you know a lot about it, which is where the empathizing comes in. And in a private company or even in academia, whatever it is, right? When I talk about vision alignment, I mean that is what you're doing, is what you're working on making sense from the problem's perspective. The ideation, I strongly believe, should include a very diverse perspective, which I'll get into in the next section. And then, of course, you do a proof of concept and you get ready to see, is it even worth productizing, or you kind of jump around in this cycle for a bit in parallel in sequence until you're ready to get into that cluster, which is on product development. People have heard of patents. A lot of people aspire to have them. It doesn't just give credit, but it protects your invention. It allows you to kind of leverage a value for your company even before you start selling, right? And in essence, even at an altruistic level, because patents mandate disclosure, you have to kind of tell people what you're doing to patent it. It helps add to the pool and the wealth of information in a collective space. Yeah, so this is just a question of patentability is about, you have to be unique globally, but for every country that you want to claim exclusive rights, you'd have to file locally. So just having an idea, just thinking of a solution is not necessarily a patentable idea, and not every product requires a patent to be successful. So that's just like a takeaway from there. And I see the chat still empty, so I'm guessing there's no other questions. I'm not used to such a one-way interaction, but all right, I'll move ahead. So when we say, there's multiple definitions, so I just picked ones I like, and in a rudimentary way by the associative property. To me, I said that technology needs observations, right? So if you need quality observation, that's what research is about. And when I speak about interdisciplinarity, and I've used that word before, I'm talking about different skill sets, different knowledges. When I'm talking about diversity, it is not limited to a particular gender or anything. It is mostly about each individual is particularly unique, and their perspective and their knowledge and their view is shaped by a variety of factors. Some innate, some learned, some by environment and whatnot. And perspective is less about what you're seeing, but how you view the situation, what you can gain from it, right? Like even if I just showed you like a glass with a glass half full with water, and I just held up and I said, what is this? One person could say glass, one person could say a tumbler, one person could say a clear liquid, another person could say vodka, like whatever it is, right? They would all be right in terms of from just looking at what it is. If I say, just tell me the first thing that pops into your mind, based on the information given, they can all be right, but it represents different perspectives. And often a good way of gauging if you have enough diversity in terms of when you're doing a brainstorming session or something is to have some strange object or something in the room and just ask people to just say what they say what they see without repeating each other, and kind of build it that way. So I think MedTech, right? Even the word MedTech, it's medical, it's technology, you have business, there's all of these complex stakeholders, all of these factors. You have healthcare, you have biologics, you have chemistry. When you talk about IVDs, you have mechanics, electronics. It mandates a diversity because it's an interdisciplinary field. So these are just some companies, right? So one of my favorite companies in India is this company called Niramai, which is these individuals that realized that there's some cultural barriers in India that are preventing women from getting timely breast cancer screening. And some of it was the privacy concerns, some of it was the intrusive nature of the mammograms. And so they developed the first, ironically, this is also contactless, but the first sort of even self-scanning portal for breast cancer. And they're doing quite well. And they got FDA approval for their thermal scanning algorithm that can differentiate between healthy and cancerous tissues even earlier than a CT scan or X-ray in some patient populations. So that's fantastic. Similarly, there's this team of really cool, dynamic women that I'd mentored a while back, where they realized that when you come to a clinic, right, firstly, TB itself is not a very, very global problem. It's centered for a few countries, and India has the largest burden today. And if they cannot get the medicine right in the same visit, the chances of them coming back is very slim. The chances of it becoming even more drug resistant or going out of control is really high. So they needed to find a way to be able to run a test quickly, and they and scan through a database and assess which drug would likely work on this individual within the same visit. And so this is what there is. And the reason I put that snapshot above, right, is they learn to leverage the larger ecosystem to help them. The funding that's available, bigger companies and entities trying to support startups, that whole movement about Startup India and everything, they've leveraged it beautifully to help get to a proof of concept faster, and now are doing really well. Another company that I'd worked with and I really liked their mission was Bempo, focusing. They realized very early on that even in the rural side and access to a hospital, all of that aside, that one of the most best stakeholders, right, is not the doctor or the nurse. The person most motivated to keep the child alive is the parent, and very often the mother. And so dealing with the communication barriers, language barriers, all of these things, coming up with a solution that could work under any condition to ensure that the mother could take some action and have some feedback as to whether that was working or not, and they need to go to the hospital or not, is why they were so successful. They're in 50 different countries. They have some partnership, I believe, with even UNICEF, going out for their kids for every child. And it looks like just a small, cute, baby watch, but there was so much of research and understanding that went into delivering this exceptional product. Another company is Fetal Light, where they were students in BITS when I had met them, and have developed a very, very cool product around a comprehensive solution for monitoring labor, being able to screen for fetal distress, to minimize unplanned cesareans, and also to lower the chance of birth asphyxia and stillbirths. And their product also evolved, into this little kind of portable case that can charge everything all at once. And with a printer and all of these things, these features got added because they realized the resource constraints of India that they were dealing with. Just having an application on a tab and a separate unit was not going to work out very well for the logistics. And so building that complexity of their fetal arrhythmia detection and fetal distress detection, I think arrhythmia might come in the future, but delivering it in a way that fit the current healthcare system, right? And deal with the different language barriers around training and understanding, and really incorporating it in their design elements itself is something this company did really well. In fact, one of the small things over here is they were a team of 4 engineering guys, and one of the reasons I work very closely with them is these boys got kicked out of multiple labor wards because no one was letting people with like wires, laptops, and like these clanky electronic systems into a room with like pregnant women giving birth. And so this was one example where they needed a woman to get them in the door, and 2, they realized that even their proof of concept prototype, right, can't look like something scary, can't look something clunky because of the sensitive space they're in. SaaS is one of another huge success story at a national level, I think, which developed, they got a patent for being the world's first multi-powered mode CPAP machine to deliver positive pressure with multiple modes of power, whether you plug it in, whether it has battery, whether it uses compressed gas, or the novel method of converting like ambu-bag pumping to a constant, stream of pressure. And yeah, so this is other forms of diversity, right? So this is a company in the agri-tech. She's a materials engineer, comes from a huge materials background, and kind of along with architects and civil engineers, leveraged this to be able to create sustainable materials to build and to meet the same specifications in terms of structure. And to kind of, one of the things I really like that she does is their biggest stakeholder, right? And companies like Fevicol also still do this, which is the carpenters, working with the end users. It is without that lens of, like whatever the contractor says, these guys will have to use, so I shouldn't care about them. No. And similarly, the farmers also, right? They were having to pay people to take away this waste versus now they were getting paid for it. So them adhering to that quality, being able to segregate all of that was a benefit for them. It's a great exercise in stakeholder understanding. Similarly, they found this fintech company was done to target even educated women, because of certain barriers, did not understand enough about their finances or how to invest. And so focusing on financial literacy. It was fintech combined with education, combined with, like a mobile consumer platform. So the founder himself, I don't know how many of y'all watch Shark Tank, but I think these guys got an investment. And it came from the background of while he's an IIT graduate, he grew up from very impoverished conditions and struggled a lot to be able to even make time to study. And realizing, his struggles and his background, he was able to understand and develop a product that could help solve that problem for others like him today. And that came from a deep personal understanding, which is probably why he has a product that is doing better in that segment than many other bigger companies. There's a company out of Mangalore, which it came from a direct observation of someone using, milk packets filled with ice to transport the vaccine in a tier 3 city on a cycle, and realizing that there needs to be a better way to maintain the cold chain because a lot of this is getting wasted. And also they are committed to not just moving everything to Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Pune, but to provide local employment and to grow their company there. Zoho is one of the big players that have shown that by employing locally, right, you can actually do a lot, not just for the economy, but even efficiently as a company. This is a Christ College professor. I think he's an English professor, if I'm not mistaken, that in his walk realized, that there has to be a solution for these, when the plastic straw ban and all happened. And so he leveraged like the coconut husk waste and talked to people in the material science department. And honestly, took advantage of the fact that he was in an academic education system, got multiple students, multiple departments, even the legal team involved to file the patent, and really build this really cool company which manufactures disposable straws and provides employment to, local women or struggling women that need to make an income. And so this is an example of interdisciplinarity, leveraging what he knew or what he was passionate about, and building that skill set from those around him to deliver a great product. And so I see there's some questions in the chat, but I'll just finish the takeaway section and then we can get to that. So when I talk about diversity, right, if you notice, even the slides about diversity were diverse. The most important diversity in my mind is the diversity of thought. It's about do you have enough people in the room making decisions that think differently from each other? And it's okay if it comes with some amount of conflict and disagreement, as long as it's done civilly. That is the best place for idea. And why I think it's important is because you will get the right solution for the problem. And if you have a diverse group, not just a bunch of yes people, or not just people who will go along with the loudest voice, truly the best idea wins. If it is a diverse perspective, if there is brainstorming, thinking, and critical discussion, you have to defend what you're saying, which makes you think about it more deeply. Similarly, you can come up with solutions more efficiently because you do have these multiple perspectives across things, and your stakeholders themselves will be happy, because if you are including them in their perspective, or their perspective in that diverse group, you'll be able to see it in a multifaceted approach. And this will really foster growth, right? Because people will work better with each other. People might realize that, okay, I'm in this field or this department, but I really like what these guys are doing. Maybe I should do that instead. And it really builds a culture of communication and creativity, which, academia by nature has, but often in a company can be missing if you don't actively do it. And it's never been a bad time to be an entrepreneur, but now it's truly something that is almost aspirational, right? A huge shift I've seen in the last 10 years is, parents sometimes celebrating when their kid is going into a startup or trying their own thing, or, taking that leap after their bachelor's also, maybe. Not all parents, some parents, or as a culture, or even why do I even have Shark Tank in there? Because the word entrepreneur, startup, innovation, all of these words are entering our vernacular in a variety of languages as a culture. And that's what you really need to have to grow. I know people talk about the market and the recession and the jobs and all of it, but America, Europe, all of them had this intense phase, like even the world wars and all, where they needed to innovate and create to jump to the next phase. If don't take those as a sign of not trying something yourself or not doing something yourself, because in some ways it's the optimal time. And finally, what I'd said before, and a lot of times, right, development doesn't end at a concept. An idea without creating impact is just an idea. It is not a product. It is not a solution. And finally, though, as you're in it, right, you don't have to be like, okay, this one person is an inventor, this one person can innovate. You want to really look at, always be questioning, always question why, how, who. Open your eyes to what you're observing, what you're learning. Have these interesting discussions constantly, read if you can, watch YouTube videos, however it is, right? Because you never know when that lightning will strike. But by opening yourselves out and your mind out to ideas, you don't know where lightning will strike, but if I put a 20-foot, iron pole in the middle, I'll increase my chances, right? That's not to say you want to be struck by lightning, but I'm sure you get the analogy. And of course, yeah, looking at problems and solutions in more of a 360 view than saying, oh, this is the tech, like I want to do AI ML to solve X. Like, don't narrow your window, don't narrow your box. Don't say, I have sensor X, now what can I do with it? Oh, this sensor can measure heart rate, I'm going to make a heart rate monitor. Like, does the world need another heart rate monitor? Is that sensor good enough? What would you be replacing? Is the current solution bad? Like, all of these questions you have to kind of approach before you jump into this is possible, so it's a company. Yeah, and these are the last few things that I'll leave on the screen as we get into questions and further discussions. I'm done with my presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Pooja. The polls, most of them have answered. I have almost 30 of them who have answered. But
Okay.
if someone wants to answer, there are like 6, 7 more. So if you want to answer, please answer it right away. And there are a couple of questions in chat. Pooja, did you check? Like,
I'm looking at it now. No, I did not read in the middle. I
yeah,
said
yeah,
I
sure,
wouldn't
sure,
be doing it. So I think you should close the poll and I'll answer the questions. Okay.
yeah, sure.
How to take medical devices, them being really expensive to the rural population. So that's a great question, Chinmay. So one of the things, right, when you say like, what is the problem? So you've identified. So sometimes cost is the problem. So making something more cost effective, right? Whether it's through value engineering, whether it's about creating the specific components, or in this case, exploring a different technology altogether, that's what you have to look at as a solution. For example, soon mobile, like the penetration of mobile devices is quite high. Now, even in rural India, they're getting network connectivity. So is there something, one of the biggest costs of technology is the hardware, right? So if you can say leverage a phone, or you can leverage an existing system or augment it, that's one way of reducing cost by focusing heavily on the software component. Secondly, yeah, what kind of materials you're using, where you're sourcing it from. The Make in India mission was also started kind of to help with this across sectors, because our import duties are really, really high. And today, India still imports up to, I think, 76% of their devices. So that's a great question. And there's a multifaceted answer, but I think factoring a target cost, right? Knowing what your target audience can afford, and whether it's being paid from insurance, a scheme, out of pocket, and having any solution or POC evaluated not just on technicality, but on the, say, BOM cost, as they say, the bill of materials. That's a fantastic way to try and tackle that. I hope that answers your question. We have Prakash over here. And he said there's a lot of invention on the therapy side. Why is this so? That's a great question. And so I worked in minimally invasive surgery. So I worked on when you say the therapy side, I assume you mean intervention, because therapeutics are also a drug. So because we're talking about medical devices, if I'm wrong, just confirm in the chat, but I'm going to assume you mean like interventional products, right? And there is quite a bit of research happening there. It's just they take a little bit longer. So when you do diagnostics, right, you can deal with a blood sample or a pinprick, or even like Dozee's case, we're dealing with a health monitor or non-invasive parameters. We're just screening, we're monitoring, we're not getting into intervention. When you get into intervention, when you're cutting open someone, when you're putting someone in something in someone's body, it takes a longer time because the stakes are that much higher from a safety standpoint. For example, I don't know if you've heard of the Chitra valve, right? That is a perfect example of an interventional product implant that goes into the heart, that was indigenously developed, but it took over 10 years to get there because they had to do those long-term safety and stability testings. So I wouldn't say there's not a lot of people working on that, but the longer you go, right, even as a company or a startup, the longer you go before your product can hit the market, the more money you need. Time is money, time is effort. So I think a lot of companies are jumping onto the or there are a lot more companies you hear about trying to go for things that they can potentially get out into the market within a couple of years. But I do know of a lot of research happening on that side as well. We have intraocular lenses also that have been made in India. There's a company called Merrill Life Sciences that has created these very TAVR balloons and angioplasty balloons and for cardiac. It's just truly like novel therapeutic approaches take a very long time to get approved of. And that's probably why we don't hear of them so much, and also why probably proportionately not enough people are getting into it as well. Okay, if that's so that is the question. All right. So I'll just go to the poll then. If there's any other questions, you can type it. So yeah, when I said what does diversity mean to people, it was all of the above. So I liked hearing that. I'd hope to see a lot more others, and that's what I wanted to cover, right? And it's really good that this group is not limiting the word diversity to one particular aspect. And in terms of what people wanted to know about working in it, right? So I see a lot of people were asking about the scope. and in terms of what are the technologies. So I'll try to touch upon that from what I mentioned, right, where I said mobile health, anything. In today's day and age, not everyone has to be a software engineer, but code literacy is something that will only benefit you with the amount of things in the digital space, right? Where the jobs are, where the interest is. If you don't like it, that's totally fine. But that is something that at least having a rudimentary understanding of programming architecture, languages will always help. Software engineers are always in demand. System engineers are always in demand. In the biomedical side, even after doing engineering, you can go into a project management route, a product management route, sort of a more customer facing, customer success type of role. You can even get into from the manufacturing side, pure design side, research. So the pathways, a lot of it are open. And interestingly enough, you don't always have to stay on the same pathway. Like smaller companies or startups allow you to learn more and grow across roles. Some bigger companies also allow lateral, but I would always say I've worked in all kinds of companies and with all kinds of partners. I've always found the kind of learning and opportunities to be highest in smaller companies. And in terms of, the technologies, AI is going to play a huge role. Miniaturization of electronics, right? The next generation of sensors, they're going to play a huge role. Utilizing things like, the environmental sensors also, whether, I think I mentioned like radar, I think I mentioned positioning. That's going to play a huge role in healthcare. Analytics, people hear the term digital twin. That's nothing to do with your social media or a chat bot. It's basically kind of being able to model health conditions and predict, hey, if I did this intervention, what's the likely one to happen? So those are some of those are the technologies that are already like at the cusp and already here in a sense. You'll have what I believe will be combination therapeutics, which is you'll have drug delivery systems, maybe with microbots or something like that for targeted drug deliveries. You'll have, you already have things like the pill cam when people swallow it to be able to take images and things like that. There'll be these maybe microfluidics based or microfabrication based needles to convert diffusion of insulin. So you'll see a lot more combination and technology interacting with drugs, I believe, in the future. And the biggest challenge in MedTech, so this was more of me trying to see what people see. And you're right, the complexity of technology, high stake, all of these. And there's a good mixture, right? I don't know if the poll allows people to choose more than one answer, but that's how I hoped it was. And it's true. All of these are challenges. And depending on the stage of the technology or the type of technology, when we say the high stakes of success and failure, even to me, I think that is the biggest barrier, right? And that drives a lot of the others. Why are doctors resistant to change? Because if they change something and then it goes and kills the patient, it's on them, right? So I think the high stakes of success and failure drive a lot of the other aspects of it. A lot of people are interested in working with Dozee. That's nice to know. And maybe I'll come to campus sometime. We can discuss and see if there's any scope for that. An important skill that you need, you did cover a lot of them. All of these are important, and it kind of speaks to the different pathways you can get to. So so that's all I have, and I think we've covered some of the poll questions as well. If there are no other questions, we can close. We started a little late, but I think I kept to the 1 hour time limit, right? Overall.
Yeah, thanks, Pooja. There is a lot of background noise, I guess. I'm not sure.
On my side?
No, from my side?
No.
I can hear a loud noise outside my house. Prime Minister is passing through my house tomorrow.
No.
So
Zoom filter is working fine.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Pooja, for a wonderful session and giving us the insight about not only just Dozee, but other companies, what struggles they had. Diversity is something which I liked that day and I wanted you to cover, which was perfect for our students. And how important having a female in team versus male in team, that's also you covered very nicely. Thanks a lot. I guess with this, with this, let's have one group picture before we close. And Then if we still have some questions from students, we can take after that.
Okay, should I stop sharing so that you can take everyone's on the screen or whatever?
Yeah, I did that. So students, can you please switch on your camera so that we can start taking some pictures?
Proof that you all weren't bots is what Abhishek wants to establish.
Yeah, I just wanted to ensure they were listening or they were sleeping on the bed and doing nothing. But I see many serious people on the workbench and
it's okay. Yeah, thanks for taking the time. I'm glad it was switched to like all online with the whole traffic situation. I think if this was in campus, we would have had to plan to have dinner together also.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.